Exposed power lines keep causing fires and keep not getting buried underground because it's expensive. I've heard people say, do you want to pay more taxes to fund this? No. I want you to use the exorbitant taxes you already collect to prioritize it. California is the place that spends money and gets nothing, which is why you may have noticed when the fires broke out, no one escaped by high-speed rail. Am I against a lesbian being chief? Of course not. Do I think a lesbian can do the job? Of course I do. And maybe she's the best person for the job. Or maybe they really wanted a lesbian in that job, and she's just the best lesbian for the job. And with essential services, that's not good enough.
Bill Maher has openly blasted the Democrats, holding nothing back. His comments spread quickly online, sparking debates as people reacted to one of their own criticizing the party. Maher pointed to hypocrisy, double standards, and what he believes is an increasing disconnect from reality. He's clearly lost patience and isn't afraid to speak his mind. Whether you agree with him or not, one thing is certain. Maher is done being polite, and this might just be the start of more blunt political talk.
Axios ran a story on how getting the water out of the hydrants in Pacific Palisades was more complicated than it seems. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's very complicated. That's why I pay 13% of my income in this state every year to people who I assumed were working on things like this.
California's taxes are through the roof, yet the problems keep piling up. Bill Maher says he's had enough. He went after Gavin Newsom for failing to handle wildfires, letting infrastructure fall apart, and making one government mistake after another. It's a harsh critique that raises a tough question. How bad will things have to get before even longtime Democrats start sounding like they're on Fox News?
When asked why so many of the hydrants in the Palisades ran out of water, Governor Newsom said the local folks are trying to figure that out. Yeah, you got to do that before the fire.
Another wildfire has struck Pacific Palisades, and once again, Gavin Newsom and the Democrats seem caught off guard. By now, it's almost predictable. Big speeches, high-profile appearances, but little real action. Instead of upgrading outdated fire prevention systems or clearing hazardous brush, the focus appears to be on climate galas and photo ops with Hollywood celebrities. It's politics as a show, lots of applause, but no meaningful results. If you're hoping for quick, effective solutions, don't expect much. You'll get hashtags, speeches, and maybe another tax, but not the fixes Californians truly need.
At least in the Palisades, the hydrants were still there. 300 other ones around the city are just gone, stolen for parts. One of the 3 reservoirs for the Palisades was offline at the one time of year when it was most needed. LA's Mayor Karen Bass, the Nero of American politics, was fiddling in Ghana while the city burned and later placed the blame on 8 months of negligible rain and winds that have not been seen in LA in at least 14 years. Yeah, that's not that long a time. Maybe look in the history books to see how our ancestors handled it back in 2011.
In a state like California, where wildfires are a yearly threat, an empty reservoir isn't just a mistake, it's a complete failure of leadership. How can there be no emergency water supply in a place that burns every summer? Taxpayers pour in billions, yet officials spend more time on photo ops than on actual fire preparedness. So when the next big blaze comes, don't just point to climate change. Point to the leaders who let the reservoirs run dry.
The mayor said about cuts to the fire department's budget, there were no reductions that were made that would have impacted the situation. The fire chief here had a slightly different take. She said, "We are screaming to be properly funded. And yes, the budget was cut and it did impact our ability to provide service. And by the looks of all the fire engines in the boneyard out of service because we didn't fix them, she's right."
Gavin Newsom once proudly touted California's new fire trucks and high-tech helicopters, claiming they could detect wildfires before they spread. It sounded great, until reality set in. Many of those trucks now sit idle in garages while the state continues to burn. At the same time, Karen Bass insists that cutting the fire department's budget had no impact, a statement about as believable as saying a car goes faster without brakes. This is exactly why Bill Maher, and a growing number of voters, are frustrated. It's not just the incompetence, it's the spin. They make big promises, deliver nothing but ashes, and still expect applause.
Exposed power lines keep causing fires and keep not getting buried underground because it's expensive. I've heard people say, do you want to pay more taxes to fund this? No. I want you to use the exorbitant taxes you already collect to prioritize it.
California charges some of the highest taxes in the nation, yet the state is crumbling. Homelessness keeps growing, public services are failing, and wildfires continue to devastate communities. Meanwhile, Texas, with no state income tax, is attracting businesses, upgrading infrastructure, and running emergency services like they actually matter. Frustrated Californians are leaving in large numbers, driven out by high costs and poor leadership. Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass keep offering empty promises while pointing fingers elsewhere. The system isn't just broken, it's being steered straight off a cliff by leaders who mistake spin for real action.
The power lines that cut through Topanga weren't upgraded because it endangered an herb, the milk vetch, which sounds like something they serve at Passover. I mean, talk about not seeing the forest for the trees. You know what the absolute worst thing for the environment is? Wildfires. A 22 study found that the smoke from just the two in 2020 wiped out 18 years of carbon reduction in the state, which means we suffered the pain of driving those early model Priuses for nothing.
Only Democrats could boast about protecting the environment while making decisions that end up damaging it. Years of real progress have been undone because leaders seem more interested in looking green than actually being green. Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass refuse to replace aging, dangerous power lines, not to save a forest, but to protect a weed called the milk vetch. The result? Massive wildfires, destroyed homes, dead wildlife, and more carbon pollution than any fleet of diesel trucks could produce. When ideology trumps common sense, everyone pays the price. People suffer, nature is devastated, and the hypocrisy burns even hotter than the fires they failed to stop.
California is the place that spends money and gets nothing, which is why you may have noticed when the fires broke out, no one escaped by high-speed rail.
California's high-speed rail has become one of Gavin Newsom's favorite talking points, but after more than a decade, it's turned into a high-speed money pit. Billions have been poured in, yet all that's visible are a few stretches of track, endless press events, and a long list of broken promises. The budget has exploded, the timeline is a joke, and real progress is nearly impossible to find. As the project burns through money faster than the trains it's supposed to run, demands for a full audit are getting louder. Still, Newsom presents it as a major accomplishment, when in reality it's just another expensive illusion in California's ongoing cycle of dysfunction.
We have the highest marginal tax rate in America, higher than almost all other states, and soon Greenland. What is included for that? Breadsticks? Because it clearly doesn't cover fire. That's government's job. Protect us from crime, violence, theft, fire. I'm not saying Alabama would have done better with fires by fighting them with prayer in school. But look me in the eye and tell me anyone could have done worse. We just got our ass kicked by fire, something Neanderthals fought to a tie.
This is why figures like Jon Voight, Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro, and Mel Gibson want Gavin Newsom nowhere near the White House. Under his watch, California has gone from a land of promise to a full-blown disaster, yet he's setting his sights on the presidency in 2028. Voters know what he left behind, a state run with the chaos of a blindfolded toddler on roller skates. One of his most baffling decisions: sending over 80% of California's water to grow almonds, one of the thirstiest crops around, while the state faces drought, wildfires, and constant pleas for aid. If this is what Newsom calls leadership, the whole country should be on alert. The next disaster wouldn't stop at California, it would head straight for Washington.
The good news is our fire chief is a lesbian. Am I against a lesbian being chief? Of course not. Do I think a lesbian can do the job? Of course I do. And maybe she's the best person for the job. Or maybe they really wanted a lesbian in that job, and she's just the best lesbian for the job, and with essential services, that's not good enough.
Bill Maher took direct aim at the Democrats, slamming their fixation on identity politics at the expense of competence. His main example, Kamala Harris, who, he argues, was picked not for her qualifications but to win what he calls the Diversity Olympics. The result, he says, is an administration so disorganized it makes a bad group project look well run. Instead of real leadership, Biden's presidency feels like a showcase of firsts, symbolic milestones with little real impact. Maher says this focus on image over results has left Americans facing higher costs, worsening wildfires, and no real solutions. From identity politics to environmental hypocrisy, He ripped into the party's failures and warned that the cracks in the Democratic foundation are widening. If this is where leadership is headed, America could be in for some very rough years ahead.